Unbelievable. That's the only word to describe what just unfolded at sea. A flotilla carrying humanitarian aid, food, and medicine bound for Gaza was intercepted by Israeli naval forces in a dramatic, tense clash that's already sparking outrage across the globe. The images are shocking: small civilian boats packed with volunteers and supplies surrounded by heavily armed warships. The clash isn't just about one convoy, it's about law, humanity, and the ongoing crisis that has left millions of people in Gaza struggling for survival. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into this extraordinary event, the interception of the Gaza aid flotilla, and breaking it down in a way you won't see on mainstream news. We'll look at what happened on the water, why Israel moved in the way it did, what the activists were trying to achieve, the legal and political fallout, and most importantly, what this means for ordinary civilians caught in the middle. Stay with me, because by the end of this breakdown, you'll understand exactly why this incident is dominating headlines and why it matters far beyond the shores of Gaza. The flotilla set sail with a mission. Several dozen boats, organized by international activists, carried food, medicine, baby formula, and essential relief items. On board were over 400 activists from across the world: doctors, aid workers, lawmakers, clergy, and human rights defenders. Their goal was both practical and symbolic: to break through Israel's blockade of Gaza and deliver aid directly to civilians, while also drawing global attention to what many describe as an ongoing humanitarian catastrophe. For those on board, this was not just about boxes of supplies. It was about visibility. They wanted the world to see that ordinary people from across continents were willing to put their lives at risk to deliver a message. Gaza should not be cut off from humanitarian support. But as the flotilla approached Gaza's waters, Israeli naval ships moved in. Reports say that around 70 miles off the coast, the flotilla was warned to change course and dock in an Israeli-controlled port where the aid would be inspected before entering Gaza. The organizers refused, insisting that the mission was humanitarian and peaceful, and that delivering the cargo directly was the whole point. That's when the interception escalated. Heavily armed naval vessels surrounded the aid boats. In some cases, commandos boarded the ships. Several activists were detained, and the convoy was prevented from reaching Gaza. Among those detained were high-profile figures, including members of parliament and internationally known activists, making this not just a humanitarian standoff, but a diplomatic flashpoint. From the outside, the imagery of the confrontation was striking. On one side, colorful banners, slogans, and volunteers waving flags of peace. On the other side, military-grade warships, surveillance drones, and soldiers in combat gear. The contrast could not have been sharper. Humanitarian optics versus military power. Inside the flotilla, the mood was tense but determined. Activists spoke of solidarity, saying their mission was a statement of moral duty, not just politics. Many said they were motivated by images of children in Gaza suffering from hunger, malnutrition, and lack of medicine. They saw themselves as carrying hope, not just supplies. Israel, on the other hand, defended its actions as necessary for security. Officials argued that Gaza is controlled by hostile groups and that allowing unscreened ships to dock directly would open a dangerous precedent. They insisted that aid can and does enter Gaza through established crossings, but only after inspection to ensure no weapons or dual-use materials are smuggled in. From their perspective, the flotilla represented a potential breach of national security, and therefore interception was unavoidable. This clash reveals what you could call a performance on both sides. For Israel, it was a demonstration of control, a message to the world that the blockade is firm and won't be undermined. For activists, refusing to turn back was also a performance. A peaceful act of defiance meant to highlight the humanitarian cost of the blockade. Both sides knew the cameras were rolling, both knew the world was watching, and both played their roles to maximum effect. The argument over safety is at the core of the controversy. Israel calls its naval blockade a safety feature, meant to protect its citizens from smuggling and attacks. But aid groups and rights activists argue that safety for civilians in Gaza is impossible under such restrictions. They point out shortages of medicine, clean water, and basic necessities. From their perspective, the blockade itself is the danger, and blocking aid ships only makes that danger worse. What made this flotilla different, and why it is going viral, are its unique qualities. Unlike traditional aid shipments, this wasn't a government effort or a UN convoy. It was a civilian-led international protest mission. People of different nationalities, religions, and political views united on the water to make a stand. That symbolism, ordinary people versus military power, is what has struck a chord around the world. It's what turns a shipment of supplies into a headline that dominates news cycles and social media feeds. But of course, every mission like this comes at a price. The activists risked arrest, detention, and deportation. Israel spent resources mobilizing naval ships and commandos. The political price is also significant. Each interception strains Israel's relationships with countries whose citizens are involved. Several governments have already lodged protests and demanded explanations for why their citizens were detained. At the same time, Gaza continues to pay the highest price. The supplies that could have helped families in desperate need never arrived. For ordinary people in Gaza, the blockade remains unbroken, and their wait for food and medicine grows longer. The legal questions surrounding this interception are already sparking debate. International law generally limits a country's authority to 12 nautical miles off its coast. Israel intercepted the flotilla much farther out, justifying it by declaring a naval blockade. Legal experts are now debating whether this was lawful, whether the force used was proportionate, and whether international norms were violated. These legal debates will continue in courts, at the United Nations, and in diplomatic corridors, ensuring the story stays alive for weeks to come. Meanwhile, activists see the publicity as a success, even though their supplies didn't reach Gaza. They argue that the world is once again talking about the humanitarian situation, that headlines are exposing the blockade, and that images of warships stopping boats of aid speak louder than any press release. For them, the symbolic mission succeeded. It exposed the reality of Gaza's isolation. The international reaction was swift. Protesters took to the streets in European cities, chanting slogans and waving flags in solidarity with the flotilla. Several governments condemned the interception. Human rights groups called for investigations. And social media amplified the story, with clips of the confrontation viewed millions of times within hours. The incident has quickly become a global talking point, sparking debates not only about Gaza and Israel, but also about freedom of navigation, international law, and the power of citizen activism. So where does that leave us? The conclusion is sobering. The interception of the Gaza aid flotilla is not just about boats and supplies. It's about the continuing clash between security and humanitarian need, about the limits of international law in contested zones, and about the power of symbolic actions in shaping public opinion. Israel may have succeeded in stopping the ships, but the activists may have succeeded in putting Gaza's plight back at the center of global attention. In the end, no one really wins. Civilians in Gaza remain trapped in a humanitarian crisis. Israel remains locked in a cycle of defending its blockade to the world. Activists remain frustrated, some detained, others deported, and the world continues to debate without resolution. But this story, this interception, ensures that the conversation is not over. And that's the reality behind the headline unbelievable, Gaza aid flotilla stopped by Israel intense clash. A story of courage and control, of symbolism and power, of law and humanity. A story that will not fade quickly. Thank you for watching. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what you think. Was this about security, or was it about silencing humanitarian aid? Let's talk about it.